keep working the door?
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Come on in.
One thing that I've really realized is the importance of like two people in these large class Zoom rooms. That I just keep on thinking if it ever was just one of us,
we just need 4 hands.
it would be really tough.
You have to do it like Jim Jimmery Jim, that drum that Dick Van Dyke wears in
Mary Poppins. Yeah, it's true. That would be cool.
Let's start off the morning with Caribou and a movie reference from 1964.
Nice.
Mix it up and there for you.
Good job. Okay, cool. Everybody's feeling the bucket sheep tends to be quite popular.
Do we have a bucket in the house right now?
We do.
Like, could we model that?
Would you like to? Oh yeah. The bucket sheep. I think we are definitely sheep number 5 and 7 today. 9. 9. Yeah, it was a long night.
Yes.
Yes, there was a lot of waking up in the middle of the night and crying.
I'm sorry.
And snot. Our 3-year-old. Yeah.
Him
but
too?
we're good. Yeah, we're good though. Yeah. Okay. So, moving on with ecology, and hoping that you're enjoying the unit, and thinking sort of broader scale, not so much over time like with evolution, but ecology is kind of a zoom out science, and we hope that it's going well for you.
I'm thinking about you guys as we do ecology a lot this unit, because around this time next week, in a normal year, this is when you would be visiting the dairy bush, and I would see you out there as I took the gigapan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So go and explore it.
If you're around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go and explore the gigapan. Go and explore the dairy bush if you're in town.
Okay, so clearing the.
Did you grab that?
I did.
Oh.
Yeah. Welcome, and
today we're going to talk about Antarctic rhinoceros.
Rhinoceros. We are going to be talking about the Antarctic,
but not so much.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe
We'll just leave it hanging there. Okay, so
that's dangerous. They're very heavy.
Yeah. So learning outcomes. You can read them. We won't read them to you. Okay, the homework though. I thought just hold off on the annotation and let's follow the instructions super well so that we can do this together. I thought we could do the homework quickly together for those of you whose life got in the way of homework and haven't been able to do it, because what we're going to do then is a question, a polling question.
Is that a picture of Daniel from last night?
This is what our child looked like last night. Okay. So the homework was to graph these lines. Using your line tool in the annotate, don't do it yet, just get it ready. Select a red line, and what we want you to do is on this graph to draw a red line to show a density dependent control treatment. Okay? For different population densities, what is the effectiveness? Yeah, test it out over on the margins. That's awesome. And then go and draw a red line. Yay. Good.
Whoa.
Yes. Very, very good. Okay, stop.
Okay, cap your markers.
I like the green line. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay. Purple line, you're totally right. Very well done. Super good. So the idea then is that the effectiveness of the treatment, whether or not it actually works, right, is directly related to the population density. Okay? Super good. Don't worry about whether it's a curved line or a straight line. Don't worry about that, because that then depends on what it is we're talking about. Okay? But generally the idea is it's a positive
so
relationship.
far we're talking about Daniel.
We're talking about Daniel, yeah. It's a positive relationship, right? So positive, like an increase on one, increase on the other. That's all we need to really know. Okay. Now, using a blue line, please draw an effective density independent treatment. Yay. Good.
Nice.
Okay. So a little bit of disagreement there.
But
most of you are getting it.
broad consensus.
So can we clear the lines and let's redraw those lines again, okay? So effective means that it's going to be high on the y-axis, right? Effective. But density independent, which means it's going to be flat. So go ahead and draw a high flat line. Very good. Okay, super good.
Let them keep drawing. I like they're
It
kind of
looks
beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah, kind of like a horizon or something, right? Yeah, wonderful. Okay, great. That's awesome. Okay, now we don't need to clear. Oh, thanks, Smith. It's okay. Okay, green lines, please. An ineffective density independent control treatment. Awesome.
You guys are fast on the colors.
Yeah, well done.
That's awesome.
I'd be like, okay, now I
Yeah.
go up here and I select better though, like.
Is this in the YouTube?
Okay.
Clear?
Clear. Yes. Well done. So that's the homework, right?
So you're done.
Very
A
good.
pluses.
A pluses.
All around.
Okay. Now, monster Easter egg drop for the next midterm. What you want to do next is on an XY axis, instead of population density, put time. Okay, time. And on the y-axis, put population size. So not density, size. And start drawing little scenarios like, okay, population, an invasive species invading a habitat is gonna, start way down here, and it's gonna grow. And then at some point it's gonna hit carrying capacity. And now I'm gonna introduce a density independent factor. What's gonna happen to the population? Well, is it effective or not effective? And then you play with it, you draw out your graph depending on what's gonna happen, effective, not effective. And then what happens if I introduce a density dependent treatment factor? What's going to happen to the population? Where's the carrying capacity going to be? How is it going to affect over time? Okay. This is like huge. So we're recording it. You can like listen to this again and graph it out and see if you can kind of start to integrate those different variables with time now and all of that. But,
So I think it's as you're drawing these out, it's a good thing literally to do it.
Yeah.
Pen and paper. Remember, we've talked a number of times about the difference between typing out and mousing out versus how your brain is used when you actually draw and kind of slow yourself down to that speed. That being said, in addition to that, if you want to flesh out a number of scenarios, in the last lecture, near the tail end of the lecture slides, there's a link to an applet where you can test a lot of these parameters and draw them out. You could use it to create new scenarios for yourself and then draw them out and then test them again.
Cool. I like it. Yeah. And for me, it's important to draw it. I like the way you said that, to like slow your brain down. I'm very slow.
Probably all of you can type or typewriter faster than you can write. I do that myself.
Yeah, we can type up to about 100. So some fast typers are at like 120 words a minute.
Yeah.
You can only write about 22 words a minute.
And what that means is, as you're doing it, your brain has to distill. It can't just record. It's not you're not looking to create the verbatim minutes of the lecture.
Yeah.
That's fine. You get that on YouTube later on. What you want is your brain to have gone, that was the important part. This is the next important part. Let's make a link between those two things.
And
it's almost like
flag.
nodes and a link.
Oh, stop talking about nodes.
Nodes
Smith
and
gets
a link.
really excited about nodes.
We're talking about nodes and links today.
Are we? I thought we were just talking about penguins. Okay, so amazing. Well done. So this is what you drew. Super good. And if you didn't have this in your homework, hopefully then you'll be like, oh yeah, now I get it. And if you did have it in your homework, well done. And if you haven't been able to do your homework, but you totally get it now, that's totally fine.
So everybody, take the bucket off your head, put your right hand in the air, turn around, and tap yourself on the back. Well done, you.
Okay, good. So here is your polling question. If I can do this fairly smoothly, I think we're going to be okay.
Smerrily food.
Yeah. Okay, here you go. I don't even know which answer is non-consistent.
like to imagine that somebody's out there graphic noveling the last option.
Yes.
The Romeo and Juliet, a Soussan of Romeo and Juliet.
Touch.
Champignon.
There was a good episode in Hannibal where they did.
What's there?
Yes.
I contest that.
No, it was kind of good. It was good. Somebody was using bodies to cultivate their
Homoerotic sensibilities of
their fungus mushroom collection. And it was neat because they were like keeping them alive by having their hands come out of the ground with little like IVs.
It's good.
Yeah, it was good.
I might have seen that one.
Yeah.
Great actors.
Super good actors. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Miles, not Miles. Madkinson?
Yeah,
Mads Milkinson.
Yeah.
Not Miles. He's very not a Miles.
No, he's not.
And Scully.
Yeah, I didn't like Scully.
I don't think you're supposed to.
I think you were supposed to feel sorry for her, but
what's the name of the
she just
other?
made me angry.
The FBI, our nominal hero. I've forgotten his name.
Yeah.
Curly-haired, good-looking guy.
Yeah. Okay, looking guy.
Oh.
Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay.
250, 84%.
Yeah, super close. We're just about to shut it down, so go ahead and get your answers in.
Vote early, vote often.
Okay.
If you've already voted, I have a question for you in the chat. And the chat is, how many of you are eligible to vote in the election to the south?
Yeah.
To the south of where we're sitting in Guelph.
Yes.
Nobody so far.
Nobody. Okay, good. We're going to stop it right now.
Next election.
And
Interesting.
polling. Share results. There we go. Most of you said treatment A is the best option to eradicate that population. And you would be correct. That is not consistent with this particular graph, with this particular chart. But lots of you said other things. So the idea is to identify whether or not treatments A, B, or C represent density-dependent or density-independent treatments, right? So the only one that represents a density-dependent treatment is treatment A, the red line, right? The other two are density-independent because they don't change with population density. They are flatliners, okay? One of them is effective and one of them is not effective. So, to say that treatment A is the best option to eradicate a population is not correct, because as a population decreases, so would its density, and therefore so would the effectiveness of the treatment. And so the idea is that you cannot use a density-dependent treatment factor to eradicate a population. What it does is lower the carrying capacity. Please replay this and graph it out over time, and hopefully you'll start to understand exactly why and how it all works. And I want you to give it a shot doing it yourself to get you those like anchor words in your own vocabulary, and we'll take it up a little bit later before the midterm, of course. But go ahead and try to do that. Treatment B is not transmitted by coughing. That would be consistent. Coughing is usually a density dependent, right? Because it's a short transmission space. And so that would be consistent. Treatment A's effectiveness will be really low in rural parts of the country where population density is usually a lot less. So that is consistent. You should stop trying treatment C because it ain't working. Not effective or lower effectiveness is consistent. Treatment A represents a deadly fungus that is spread when two individuals touch. That's also consistent because it would be a density-dependent treatment for over a short transmission space, right? Okay, I hope that's okay.
Handful of people have voted. A couple of people
Yay.
can vote next year. One person their birthday's on the 4th. So I think they need to talk to their parents.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, I hear ya. Okay. So that'll be in the slides. You'll be able to read that question and do it again, go through it. Okay. Now, the fun begins. We want to bring you to Antarctica. And we want to talk about Antarctica. And one of the reasons why we like to talk about the Arctic and the Antarctic is because of their relative simplicity, believe it or not. They are extreme environments, and we've already talked about it with respect to sort of global distribution patterns, right? We would anticipate that at the poles there would be the fewest number of species, so the lowest biodiversity or lowest alpha diversity, and sort of big populations, right? And so it becomes truly a magical place, both just from going there, and also from a scientific perspective. We like simplicity so that we can tease out all of the confounding variables to understand things a little bit more easily. It's easier for our brains to be able to do that. Smith has decided that he likes a challenge, and so does predominantly most of his field work in Costa Rica, which is messed up in terms of complexity.
I've tried to throw in a slide. We'll see if it updates, but I've shown a picture of a food web study that we did, not in Costa Rica, but in Canada, even just to say that these things scale very quickly. And so it's important to get, this Antarctic, the polar regions are fantastic places to do this, as you said, because you know the players in the play. So trying to figure out the roles in this drama is relatively simple. This is not Dickensian. This is not, oh my God, who is that? Or it's not George R.R. Martin, where you need like the list at the front going, who the hell is the knave of the the house of what?
Yeah.
And why are they drinking mead for an hour?
So depending upon the different ecosystems, we have to ask different questions at different scales, right? Because of the relative complexity. And so Antarctica and the Arctic have become these sort of model habitats to study because of their relative simplicity. Antarctica is much more simple than the Arctic, just simply as a function of really low alpha diversity that we talked about before. And I've been there. I've had the absolute privilege of being there for a significant chunk of my lifetime. It just blows my mind every time I've had the privilege.
And
of
I like
going.
the video. I like the image you've chosen as well, because it's a it's not presented with a northern bias.
Yeah, beautiful.
But you fly in not from on top thinking north is up and
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So, okay, but we are going to get you super quickly familiar with the Antarctic ecosystem by asking you to think about this character. And I hope it is still culturally relevant. I keep on asking my students to tell me when this is no longer part of your sort of cinematography experience as a young person. So if at any point students don't know who this is, do not worry about it, because you know enough about Antarctica to be able to play along with this game. What we're going to do is we're going to build an Antarctic food web. If you want to think about the characters in Happy Feet because you've seen the movie, then that would be I love this kid. Good. That would be completely appropriate. I have some biological problems with Happy Feet number 2.
Happy Feet 1 is surprisingly...
It's really quite good.
They did a lot
but
of work.
You can think about Happy Feet. In fact, you have to think about Happy Feet number 2 in order to get all of the different, representatives from the ecosystem.
But it would have been a great movie to be doing background research on, because you would have been doing Antarctic food web and seminal tap dancing research, because those were complicated tap scenes.
And invasive species kind of research, because there's a puffin in the second one.
Somebody, Team Mayaz, has suggested movie night this, and I think that's a great idea. Find wherever it's streaming.
First movie you ever saw, which means that like in the next year or two, we're gonna have to move on to another movie. Okay. Anyway.
What did I bring up earlier? It doesn't stop.
Okay.
Mary Poppins.
Yes.
1964.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to clear the annotation, and we are going to use annotation in just a little while, but for now, let's clear it. And I have to, in order to make this work, I have to stop this and go here. There we go. Perfect. Now, in the chat, please start sharing the characters, the different species, or the different aspects of the ecosystem in Happy Feet that you remember. And if you do not know Happy Feet because you're maybe my age, or even younger, then please just think about the different animals and plants and things that are in the Antarctic. And we will start uncovering.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, what are we getting?
Leopard seal.
Nice, leopard
Somebody
seal.
suggesting polar bears.
Wait. Leopard seal is a G.
Yep.
There we go. There's our leopard seal. Very good. No polar bears in the Antarctic. Those are Arctic exclusively. What else?
Oh, somebody said lichen, which is literally true.
Yay! Lichen. Amazing.
Krill.
Krill. Okay. Will and Bill Krill are over here. There we go. Will and Bill.
Emperor penguin.
Emperor penguin. So all penguins are represented by box number A. There we go. Here we go. Good. What else?
Skua.
Ooh, nice. Well done.
Yes, and then we've got Adele Royal Macaroni.
Adele. Yeah, Royal. The macaroni is not technical. Well, there's like 4 of them.
Rockhopper.
The rockhopper. None of them in Antarctica. They're all in the sub-Antarctic islands. But yeah.
I'm going to think of them as Supra.
Yeah. What else?
Elephant seal.
Elephant seal. Very good.
Orca.
Yes. Excellent. Where's
Somebody
our orca?
even suggested the
F.
which genetic cluster is J or I.
Aha.
That's good.
Aha. Very good. Okay.
Crab eater seal.
Oh.
Skua. Did I say skua? Yes,
Skua,
I did.
you
Clearly I
did. Yeah. You know what? There's only the elephant seal and the leopard seal. There's no crab eater seal or wet L seal in the movie. So we'll just kind of go with leopard seal to represent all of them. What about some abiotic things?
Oh, yes. What are some of the abiotics? So non-living things that...
Non-living things.
Ice, snow.
Here we go. Snow, very good. Dolphins, there are some types of dolphins. Orca is a type of dolphin. Yeah, rocks, snow, ice, absolutely.
Cold weather.
Cold weather, yes. Cool. And then finally, one type of one type of whale that was not mentioned.
People have mentioned humpbacks, minkies,
Very good.
killers,
Good.
narwhal.
Yes, no narwhal. And then finally,
But you have seen narwhal.
yes, they're gorgeous.
In the Arctic.
In the Arctic. Okay, so
Little sunlight.
fish, jellyfish, other invertebrates in the deep sea also represented. I think there's Will and Bill Krill that are watching them go by. And then finally, here we go with phytoplankton that's represented in the ice, in green ice, which is just so cool to see.
And there's a couple of suggestions of different invertebrates that are not in the film, but we'll have them represented kind of roughly with the jellies.
Yeah, with
We'll think
the
of
sea
all
life.
like 90% of life. This is the bias of it. This is actually literally a good simplification because that we're making intentionally, because this is one thing that often happens because of the lack of knowledge we have of most of life.
Yep.
So we've got a single species of bird there, the skua, and then krill, which is actually hundreds of species, and we're going to represent it here with a box, with a node.
With a thing, one thing, all the things, right? Because we tend to go for the charismatic. Yeah.
Well, as we understand, we see, and we understand.
Totally. Okay, so good. We have all of them.
So well done, you.
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start building our food web.
And just a confirmation here from a question in the chat. What are we talking? We're talking about the Antarctic. So not just polar, but in this example with Happy Feet, we're talking in the southern pole.
Yes. Okay. Super good. Now, what we're going to do, again, is we're going to get out our lines that we were using before for the homework, and we're going to start to build a food web. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with, let's start with penguins, and using a green line, if you can, could you please connect via a food web the penguins to some of the other animals or representations here. So where would a penguin connect to using a green line, please? super good.
There's so much drawing happening. There's a lag in probably in them seeing it.
Yeah.
Because there's a lag in me seeing it, and I'm right here.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's good though.
Give it a second.
Really good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is good. So a couple of things about food web terminology when we're talking about basically taxa or species when we have these nodes or these boxes into which we put a species or a group of animals. And then the lines we're going to call links, and those lines can represent who's eating whom. So there's a directionality to the lines.
Yeah.
And some of you have indicated that. Some of you have chosen that this. So a red arrow going from the penguin to the skua. That's a spoiler maybe.
I like this one over here. This is great.
Yes, that's good.
Right here. That's awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So nodes and links, those are essentially the things that we're talking about when we're talking about food webs. And we've been doing that since almost 100 years. First time anybody talked about these diagrams was in 1927.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So, yeah, what you've got is you've got some of the penguin going down to the krill, but then you also have the penguin going to the leopard seal. So clearly the direction of those links would be different, right? I've seen lots of leopard seals hunting penguins. There are some terrible stories and some exciting stories, and leopard seals are basically like cats with mice. They play with their food, and so you kind of have to have like a real strong circle of life filter as you're watching it going on. But krill, yes, krill. But also, whoever put that green line to the fish or the jellyfish, yes, they do eat quite a bit of that as well. And in fact, that helps them sort of niche partition, right? So delis will eat more krill than gentoos, for example, in order to like minimize competition.
Can I throw in a thing about the jellies?
Yeah.
We're just learning, even though this is, and we've talked, and some of you have brought up how simple this is, and we brought up how simple this food web is. We're still learning new things about it, and that's to a large extent because most of these connections, these links, are made by observation or by examining gut contents.
Yeah. And
gut contents are biased towards those things that have hard parts. And so they've underrepresented, and we have lacked understanding in how jellies or things that have very few hard parts, how frequently they're eaten or how important they are to those that eat them. Yep. And with DNA, when we can sequence a gut content, we then go, holy man, everybody's eating jellyfish.
So one of the biggest mistake or most obvious mistakes to kind of support exactly what Smith was saying is the name of the crab eater seal, right? Pretty, obvious where it came from, in that the people that were hunting them thought that they were eating crab when they opened up their guts. It was full of this pink meat. It turns out, once you actually do an analysis, that it's not crab. They do not eat crab. They've never eaten crab. And it's 100% krill. So, yeah, the crab eater seal, total misnomer. Yeah, and aided by more advanced techniques in ecology and species identification. So there you go.
So well done.
Okay, good.
Food web
so
ecologists.
Let's do one more though, just to kind of make sure that we're all good. Plus, we've had some new people join, so let's get them joining as well. Let's clear it. And what I'd love for you to do, please, is to connect. Let's connect krill. So what eats krill? Go ahead and do that. I was going to do it with different color lines, but it's one color is just so much, right? Yeah, super. Good.
Waiting for somebody to do like boom, boom.
Yeah. Good.
And let's give them a second because it's not
Showing up.
Yeah. Because they're so aggressively food webbing.
It's so good.
It's really good.
Yay! I love the big arrow. Yeah. Well done. Yeah.
And you never come back.
Okay.
And you never come. Okay. I think it's refreshed.
Really good. Well done. Okay. Pretty much all the things, right? And all the things kind of caused ecologists to focus on those species which represented food for all the things. And in fact, it created a whole kind of branch of ecology that I think is worth kind of talking about. We have a minute before we have to move on. But one term that you'll see...
We can do whatever we want.
It's true. One term that you'll see still in ecology literature is the term keystone species. And are we going to fight about this one?
We might.
That would be okay. Okay, so what I'm going to say is that there's no such thing as a keystone species. A keystone species was defined, so we have to define it, was defined as a species, whose removal would cause essentially the collapse of the ecosystem. That it was so vital, so important that it essentially defined the ecosystem. And I would modify that and say that every species plays an important and critical role. And that the removal of any species has a significant impact, and that species that have more connections or more of these, lines, right, are particularly important. But they're not, to me, they're not keystone species. They're not, we shouldn't be just focusing on protecting krill, because that could cause us to, sort of artificially focus on something and not see the rest of the forest because we're focusing on the tree, that kind of deal.
So I'll start with the overlap. I agree. Keystone species, when Bob Payne came up with it, it was seized by the literature very quickly and applied overly broadly. So, and the example here of talking about krill as a keystone species, I think is incorrect for a bunch of reasons.
Yep.
One of them being, like I said earlier, krill is not a species.
Right.
It's hundreds of species, maybe thousands, even just in the Antarctic.
There's 7 actually in the Antarctic. Nice and simple.
So
are you a splitter?
of course I am.
Okay.
We know nothing, Jon Snow. I'm Ygritte.
Okay.
This hair was red. So that's the first problem. And the second is that I would say I can think of, when applied more stringently, I can think of examples where there are, so coral and reefs. All of those species, all the coral reef ecology is 100% dependent on coral. And if the coral isn't there, as we're seeing in the Great Barrier Reef, when it's not there, the species, the web of the network of connected things directly and, more importantly, indirectly to the coral have nowhere to go.
And what you're describing then by saying coral or krill is not keystone species, but keystone taxa.
Yes, but I think in some cases, and so that's important, the difference that there's taxa taxa is a word that can be multiple things. It can be higher than a species in the Linnaean hierarchy, or it can just mean that you mean multiple species. So in this case, that box is of a taxon, there's multiple species there.
And from an ecological point of view, it's really keystone functional group.
Yeah. And sometimes, I would say sometimes those are played by species, and some species have a disproportionate effect.
They outcompete for that niche, sure. But it's the keystone functional group, and then if you're talking about keystone functional group, you're pretty much talking about everything then within, like the predators also, not just the food playing an important role. And so that, I think,
so
is...
I would disagree, and here's what I would suggest that you could do. We could do.
Yeah.
That we could use food web. So what have we learned so far in food webs? We have nodes or boxes here that are species or taxa.
Yeah.
We have lines that connect them, the who eats whom. We'll call that the number of lines connectants. You could then say, per node, who's the most connected, and then that would be my way to start on that people could take this discussion, this disagreement, and quantify it and say, are there ones that have a disproportionately high number of nodes?
Yes.
And would those fit the criteria for keystone species, yes or no?
And are they individual species,
Yep.
or are they really
Yep.
just cryptic species? And then it just
Yep.
gets so to me it's kind of a not really useful term, because there's just so many it depends after it that it's better just to kind of dive in. But yeah, and you're being respectfully quiet. Good. Okay. Yeah, to me it's not useful, and instead it's way more useful to look at exactly this with respect to the relationship of krill to the other individuals or other species within the food web and all of that stuff. And like Smith said, krill, we know of 7 different Southern Ocean krill species, but it is entirely possible that there are a lot more than that. So if we just focused on one, like Antarctica superba, which is amazing because it's super, then we would be artificially just focusing our attention, with respect to conservation.
But it's
like
also so there's a couple, and I like the drawing on the
that's
on the
great.
jelly, but
Yeah.
there's how many there's some comments here. I'll forget what I was going to say
Yep.
and go to some of the comments. Questions about where the arrowhead goes and those lines, and they're just toward. It follows the energy. So it's towards the predator or towards the who's consuming, where that energy is going. So follow the energy.
And not all people who draw food webs know that. So do you know what I do is I go to the top predator, which is usually humans, and I look at where the arrow is because humans are not going to be eaten by much, and humans eat a lot of things, and so you can kind of understand the directionality of the person who was drawing it by looking at the top predator in the food web and seeing where the arrow is.
And there's some questions about jellyfish. How come a lot of them, I guess other species or taxa, eat jellyfish if they sting? And there's a couple answers to that. One of them is that some of the things that eat jellyfish are very big, and so the sting is very comparatively small to those taxa. And the other is that to get a big jelly, you have to have hundreds and hundreds of tiny, tiny little jellies that have very few nematophores or nematocysts, these stinging cells. And so you can eat little beautiful baby jellies with relative impunity.
Yep. Okay, so the actual Antarctic food web. This is kind of what it looks like. You can see that krill is sort of intimately and deeply connected to a lot of things, and that there are potentially some surprising connections that maybe you didn't know about. The leopard seal eating lots and lots of krill. Most of the time, actually, and it's really only baby penguins and really only female leopard seals that are related. So males leopard seals tend to just eat predominantly krill.
Question: do seals not eat penguins?
Yeah, no, not the Weddell seal, and not the crab eater seal. Crab eater seal is eating like literally 99% or 95% krill. The Weddell seal is focusing on large fish. Deep fish. Okay, now there's a loophole in all of the conservation and protection of the Southern Ocean that allows for certain fishing and hunting for scientific purposes, and also doesn't protect krill nearly as much as it should. And therefore, there are some countries who are actively going and fishing in the Southern Ocean waters, even though it is as close to being a world park as we can get, sort of politically. And so thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of krill are being taken from the Southern Ocean to the point where it is potentially becoming unsustainable, just because there are so many nodes that are connecting it. Krill can be used for all sorts of things, although you don't want to have a krill salad or cocktail like you would shrimp, because the amount of fluoride in their shells will poison us. So there has to be this whole sort of chemical process to denature and remove the shell before we could consume it. But there are a lot of things that can consume it. So it's used in dog food and cat food and things like this.
Questions there
Yes.
in the chat and on the screen.
Yeah.
About the line linking the seal to the skua.
The skua. Oh.
Is that decomposition? Is that scavenging?
No, that's like full on, like kind of sort of dive from underneath the skua that's floating on the surface of the water and like bam, just getting it and pulling it down under the water. It's horrifying to watch, but it does happen. It also happens in the Arctic. I've seen walrus do that with birds floating on the surface of the water, and then they come up and they like grab them. So yeah.
Isn't it in the Antarctic populations of orca that they have the crest wave strategy? Where they knock the seals off using
Yeah. So there's a lot of like wait and pounce kind of strategies that happen on the surface of the water. So.
Is the line the wrong way then?
Potentially. Yeah.
That one with the
Yeah,
question
yeah,
mark.
Yeah, because we're going
Follow the
from the
energy.
things that they eat. Yes, exactly.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. So if we were to remove krill, though, the question is what would happen? Okay. And so somebody wrote here, shouldn't the arrows be going the other way? Then yes, for sure. Moving on to removing of the krill, it is interesting to start thinking about what might happen, right? Especially because it does have this like keystone species designation, right? So the whole thing would collapse potentially. Oh, thank you, Charlotte, for fixing that. That's great. Really good. Okay, so if we remove krill, what's going to happen? And the thing is that it isn't sort of, if we think about it in terms of a keystone species, the obvious answer is, well, the whole ecosystem is going to collapse. Or if we think about it in terms of the larger context of the ecosystem, the functional groups, the niches that everyone plays, what also might happen other than just a collapse, right? So if we remove Will and Bill krill, it is possible that things will start to change their niche, start to adjust and adapt, right? The answer as to whether or not that happens depends entirely on all sorts of things, right? Like the biological, the different adaptations, the different possibilities, whether or not, the digestive systems of penguins can digest things other than krill, to whether, the fish or the jellyfish or whatever are like too deep or too shallow or too far away, right?
At the right time of day, that depth.
Exactly. So it depends entirely, but it is important to understand that it is possible that niches can be changed or can be adapted in the context of the removal of a keystone species or an important species.
The question in the chat, does that mean they change into different species adapting to other food sources? So maybe,
yes.
But in the ecological time, that is just your niche shifting. You're still the same species, you're changing what you're eating. Could that over evolutionary time become a new species? For sure.
Yeah.
But in the short terms, hundreds of years, thousands of years of ecology, dozens of years, months.
Yeah.
It just means the breadth of your diet has changed.
That's right. It is the potential scenario for the introduction of a barrier to gene flow. And think about whether it would be sympatric or allopatric speciation. And so you're starting to like connect in different topics. That's amazing.
Penguins in pelicans rather in South Africa become birds of prey due to overfishing.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. It is possible that there will be extirpations, right? That there will be localized extinctions as a result of a collapse. And so you may lose the penguin, right? And it may then become an even more simplified food web. But there aren't these kind of blanket rules about what is going to happen. It really does depend. So this is from a textbook, just to kind of show you that it really is that simple in these polar regions. They've got a couple of extra different things, flying birds and larger fish and smaller fish, those types of things. But really, it is that simple. Oh yeah, the Ross's seal. I think I've only ever seen one of them.
Which one is it?
The Ross seal. They are really quite rare. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
That's because they work at the museum.
Okay. So, very, very quickly, here's another polling question just to make sure that you're kind of getting what we're going at with respect to what happened. Just go ahead and give that a quick read, and we will wrap up by telling you a real story and how all of this fits in. Okay. Quick. Get them in. Good job. Great. The vast majority of you are getting it correct.
That's a good Easter egg.
This one?
No.
Oh.
The vast majority of you are getting, they can't see that.
They can't
right.
see. Yeah.
It's like-
Not yet. Not yet. Here we go. End polling. Share results. Good. Okay. So yes, most of you got it correct. Good. The niches of the other species will shift quite likely, right? So how does this play out? What do you mean? Tell us the story of the things that actually happened. Give me something real. We're done with happy feet, I hope. Maybe that's what you're thinking. So let's take a look at something real. But first, Smith has an intervention.
It's not really an intervention. It's just, this is a study that I did with some friends who are also Guelph people, where we looked at, this is a node in the center at the bottom there of that fan. That's one species of caterpillar larva in the northeast of North America. And the top view is the things that eat that, or eat the things that eat that. Just insects. This doesn't include birds or the things that eat the birds. These are just the insects. So we're pulling this out just to say, things get complicated very quickly with the things that we think we know. And the difference between the fan on the top, which has fewer nodes and more connectants, more shared links than the one on the bottom is our understanding of the food web now that we've used DNA to explore these links. There's more nodes, they're more specialized, so connectance has actually gone down, the diversity of the web has gone up, and the amount of hair that we pulled out reached kind of an asymptote because there's no more hair to pull out. But things get very quick. This isn't tropical. This is like where many of you are sitting right now in the temperate region.
And you might imagine then that in the tropical, for a single individual species, it would be simpler, no?
Potentially, because there's so many, there's such a diversity of things. The hypothesis or the thinking is that there's the abundance of any one of them can't be large enough for all sorts of things to eat that thing.
So there are more niches, but smaller.
Smaller abundance of things,
Yeah,
less abundance.
Okay.
Now, speaking of complicated.
Let's
would that it were so simple.
This, the Grand Banks food web. Grand Banks, really important place in Canadian history.
Yeah.
Probably responsible largely, or the resources there largely, for the unfortunate and terrible relationship that Europeans had with the people of North America. And cod was kind of at the center of all of that. It was one of the reasons why Europeans were there, why they stayed to harvest the cod that was on the Grand Banks. And if we take a look at the relationship of cod to everything that is in the Grand Banks, you can see that it is a very sort of prominent node within that food web, right? So even though it is a relatively cold and stark place, it is actually full of life. Teeming with life. And cod is right here in the middle of all of this, okay? And we're going to actually complicate it even more for you a little bit for the homework. But all this to say, though, that the cod was super important both for the people, the economy, the history of the indigenous people in North America, and also from an ecosystem perspective. Okay, so we know a lot about cod because we have this intimate relationship with cod, both positive and negative. And the cod fishery was an important part of Atlantic Canada's history. Again, both predominantly bad, but also good. And economically too, it was important, and so that was really important for the people, the settlers that set up there, as well as continued well into the 1900s, and then even in my lifetime, cod and the cod fishery was very important and a very positive thing for the people who were living there. Until it wasn't. And so it was associated with economic prosperity, and families were doing quite well, those who had fishing permits. And of course, we recognize, especially what's going on right now in Nova Scotia, that there's a great inequity associated with who has access to these fishing permits. But for the families that did, life was okay. Life was okay. Until the mid-90s, when all of a sudden and fairly suddenly, though it was predicted by some scientists, there was a massive collapse in the cod fishery, which caused devastating economic as well as social loss in the Atlantic provinces, particularly in Newfoundland. And people, it was horrible. It was a massive catastrophe. People had to be retrained. Could you imagine, spending 30 years out on the water fishing for you and your family, and now all of a sudden you find yourself in some kind of regional community college classroom learning how to use computers because you need to be retrained. It was awful for mental health. It was awful for economic health. And so it became a really political and social issue, of course, right? So there was this kind of like all the science over here and then all of the politics over here, very similar to what's happening right now. Although to me, what's happening right now in Nova Scotia, science doesn't play a role really at all in terms of Indigenous rights. But in this particular issue, science played a huge role because it was directly related to the number of tags that were being given out before the actual collapse.
Yeah, this is super. It'd be an interesting kind of compare and contrast kind of a question because this is super different scenario than the lobster situation.
Totally different. Yeah. But this was what was driving the politics, right? Was the myth that the cod population declined because of the gray seals that were eating them. And gray seals do eat cod. It was well known. And so the idea was that, all of the gray seals were eating all of the cod. And that's why the scientists, it was said, that's why the scientists weren't able to account for it when they were calculating how much would be allowed for the fishery. That's the myth. Okay, was the idea that it was then leaving no fish available for the fishers. What happened, though, because of this myth, was that it sparked a cull of gray seals. So thousands and thousands of gray seals were killed, thinking that it would protect the cod fishery. But of course, what actually happened is a lot more complex than that. And this is what science has revealed was the actual sort of the reality of what was going on, was that there was an overfishing.
That's a great diagram.
A reduction of the amount of cod that didn't cause the ecosystem to collapse. It caused the gray seals to adapt their niche. So gray seals started eating smaller fish. They adapted quite readily, quite quickly. Within an individual's lifetime, they are smart enough to go, oh, I should start eating different food. And they started eating smaller fish, which means that they actually started to prosper and their population grew as a result of that niche adaptation. And so the hunt for gray seals was a completely scientifically, ecologically useless act. It did make people feel better. It, I guess, helped their mental health, but it wasn't really going to actually solve the problem of the cod fishery.
One of the cultural problems or cultural realities of this in the groups of people talking and fighting or through this discussion in the 80s and 90s and 2000s was the fact that some of those boats were from Canada.
Yeah.
And they knew what they were doing because they were legislated by the same bodies and controlled by the same bodies. And many of them, and many of the hyper-effective boats were not from Canada.
Right. Because it was off in international waters, and so there was all sorts of international tension, and it was very stressful for so many reasons, right? Yeah. But science and politics, deeply connected, right? In terms of the effect that it has on the ecosystem. And, while we can pretend that we're uncomfortable talking about this, like I'm uncomfortable talking about, Indigenous history, I'm uncomfortable talking about international politics, as it relates to science, but that's my problem. The fact that these things are sort of deeply integrated is a necessary part of learning about ecology and about science.
And history, like this is if you think, oh, okay, well, food webs, I'm in this course, I'm going to move on to other things. The only reason that Saint-Pierre and Miquelon remain French territory is this fish.
Teeny tiny little islands, maybe you didn't know, off of the coast of Newfoundland, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon are French territory, and you get your 200-mile fishing radius, right?
Because of this fish.
So it's super important. And go and visit those 2 islands. It's hilarious
They
and
have
beautiful.
Better
And way better croissants.
better croissants than
Yeah.
some parts of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Okay, so your homework is, so we've taken the cod food web and we've simplified it for you. But it's a little more complex because of some things that we mentioned before, that, you know, within a lifetime, the niche or the role of that organism can change, right? Especially in your larval form, you're probably prey. It's very unlikely that you're a, you know, large predator. But then as you grow, you may occupy different niches. You may go from being a herbivore to a carnivore, all of those types of things. So those can change throughout a lifetime. And so we want you to work with this food web, okay? You can see that the arrows are going in the opposite direction of what we were saying before. So always just start with your top predator, humans, and you can see that it's, you know, who eats what, and it's kind of going down towards the bottom. So it's going in the opposite direction of the energy, but it doesn't matter. It's not wrong. It's unconventional, maybe. Mine previously was wrong because they were both directions and it was confusing. So thank you very much for fixing that. Okay, here we go. Here is your homework question. So based on this simplified food web, what would happen if 25 years after the collapse of the cod population, we released millions of adult, juvenile, or larval cod into the Atlantic? So 3 different scenarios. What might happen? Recognizing that it totally depends, but start thinking about what it might depend on and what an outcome might be.
And I guess we have to go.
We have to go.
Well, at least change roles.
Yes.
So we'll stop recording.
Okay.
We'll take a breath.